The Jewish people have blessings for waking, blessings for sleeping, blessings for eating, blessings for washing. Now remember, I was indoctrinated into this Jewish experience by living in South Florida. Now I wasn't the brightest bulb in the world when I got there from my experience with Judaism, but I was I was moving into an oceanfront high-rise. And I walk up to my hallway and I'm going into my apartment, and I look down the hall and every single door jamb has something on the door jamb. So I go down to the leasing agent and I say, do I need one of these things on my door? What is this thing? And of course she said, oy vey, what are you, from out of town or what? Anyway, and of course that little thing is a mezuzah, and it has a piece of the Torah in it. So every time anyone is walking into their home, they're blessing their home. They're recognizing their oneness. They're recognizing who they are. So how many times are we blessing the things that are going on in our lives? So when these experiences come up that don't feel like such a blessing, we get to be prayed up so we can experience it as it truly is, rather than something that's happening to us. Life's happening through us rather than to us. If you read these stories of the Old Testament, there is always stories of the Jewish people overcoming things that were, felt so big. And one of these stories was at a time of the war when King Saul was king, and the Israelites and the Philistines were warring. And each day they'd come down to the war front, and guys would, kill one another, and then they'd go back to their camps and eat and get ready for the next day. And as this was going on, and finally a guy from the Philistines' side, a big guy, Goliath, came forward. He had on his armor, he was strong, he was tall, he was bigger than anybody. And he said, if any of you guys can beat me, any of you Israelites, then all of the Philistines will serve you. But if you don't beat me, then you all will serve us. So everyone's just, oh gosh, Goliath is so big, these things are so big in life, right? These challenges, and everybody's got something going on. Sometimes they feel small, but sometimes they feel really, really big. They're Goliath size. So this young man named David, who was just tending the sheep, he was not a warrior, he came to bring food to his brothers who were in the war. And he was new on the scene. And he came to bring them food, and then everyone's talking about Goliath. There's this big guy down there that nobody can fight, and we're all afraid, and this is not going to work. And here was this conversation going on that David just arrived. See, David hadn't been in this conversation about ain't it awful? And how often are we in these conversations about ain't it awful? And pretty soon when somebody comes along and goes, you can do that, we go, no, see, I've been practicing 30, 40, 50 years about ain't it awful, so I couldn't possibly do that. But David shows up with this new consciousness, and he looks at Goliath, and he thinks of this God, this creation that he is part of, and he thinks also of all the treasures that are going to come and winning the war, and he's got this whole thing of, this is a powerful experience. And since he wasn't part of the consciousness that was ain't it awful and it can't happen, he said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to fight that guy. And his brothers are like, are you crazy? Who do you think you are? How many times do we say that to ourselves, or other people say that to us? Who do you think you are? But David knew he was part of creation. So David goes down and he gets a slingshot and he throws it. Oh, also King Saul said, do you want my armor? And David said, no, you know what? I am one with creation. I am part of the world awakening. So David goes down with his slingshot, as we all know. He picked up smooth rocks. He didn't have all the armor and all the artillery, but he was a slingshot guy. So he slung that rock. It hit Goliath in the forehead. Goliath fell down, and he went over and he cut the head off of Goliath. And he cut the head off because the thinking that was going on at that time, that represented an end of that thinking for David and for the Israelites at that time. Because they won, but what they really won was a shift in consciousness. What they really won was nothing is bigger than that spirit that's within you. And the final aspect of Kabbalah that I saw as I was looking at this was that we have plenty of time. You have plenty of time. Can we just say that together? I have plenty of time. I have plenty of time. And take a breath. Because I don't say that to myself very often. Do you say it to yourself pretty often? I have plenty of time. Because in the Kabbalah way of seeing things, you're not a body with a soul, you're a soul with a body. You're a soul on a journey. And when a person dies in the Jewish tradition, they bury the body immediately because the soul carries on. The soul goes on to do its next thing. So you have plenty of time. Some days I think, well, if I have 40 more years to live, I don't know if I'm going to figure all this out halfway through this thing. So we have plenty of time, and that is a lot of peace when we give ourselves a break in that way. I have plenty of time. And by coming from that place of being calm, then we get that we're not limited, we're infinite. We're the place where the world is awakening. There's not this place of you in this one suit, this bodysuit, that's it. You're part of a spiritual awakening that will go on and on and on. There's a few people in this world that have been teachers. And they are teachers because they overcome big odds, because they get their infiniteness and their freedom to live the soul purpose, S-O-U-L or S-O-L-E. The sole purpose of the greatest pleasure that there is, which is knowing God. One of these men was during the persecution of the Jewish faith, and every faith has had its persecution, but Jewish people are certainly one of the many that have been persecuted in their efforts to live their faith. And it was a man that was alive in the late 1930s and was part of the Holocaust. And everything had been taken away from him. He was a physician, his work, eventually his wife. They kept him alive only because he was a physician. And he had a manuscript that he'd been writing that he put underneath his mattress. And at one point, the Nazis took that manuscript and they brought him out and they made him take off his wedding ring, which was his last possession. And when Viktor Frankl took off his wedding ring, he recognized, he felt this freedom. He felt this place, that this was the last place of his identity of being finite rather than infinite. And he recognized that the Nazis could not make him hate them. He could not make them hate him. That he, recognizing being one with creation, had all the power. That his soul was the place that his body was holding his soul, not that he was his body, was the body and the soul was there, that he was on an infinite path of freedom. And friends, when we can be in that place, and Viktor Frankl wrote a book, of course, called Man's Search for Meaning. Because as I said at the beginning, these traditions, these places where we come to awaken are where we find our meaning. And Viktor Frankl was such an incredible teacher because he was so detached from all the things that he thought made him who he was. And so this spiritual path allows us to have this space of saying, do these things in my life, whatever they are they part of my making this world a better place? I invite you to know that you coming to a series on world religions, there's something in you that wants to awaken to make the world a better place. There's something in you that wants to understand what's going on this planet, so we don't have to live in this place of this smallness, me versus you, but that this whole world is a place of where we can release judgment and embrace each other in this unity of love. So perhaps we can let our tradition be one of being curious as to how other people live their lives and to see what fits for us and what doesn't fit, but in the way of being loving and supportive of one another. So then that way we can see that we are part of this creation that is this planet, that the greatest pleasure of your life is to know the God source that you are. And to understand that everything is a blessing and that we need other people to remind us of that and to be with us when we're going through the times of our life that feel so difficult. And these girls called the church and said, we need some help. Come pray with us. And finally, that we really understand that we are infinite and that there's nothing. And if you're feeling like something's too much in your life and you don't know your connection to it, read Man's Search for Meaning. It will allow you to understand this huge meaning that is your life. Because each of us is so precious and so important. And as we understand that and feel that spiritual fullness and receive, then we automatically want to give. So I just bless you all. As Duke said, you're all so much an important part of my spiritual home and my spiritual family. And thank you for awakening as we all do this together. So in the name of closing and the name of love and into meditation, I say shalom. Yeah, beautiful.